Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for True Detective Season 3, Episode 2. Alright, so I'm back with Episode 2, gonna go over a recap, of course, and then favorite character, some more overall thoughts, and then with a rating, of course, at the end of the video here. So, so HBO decided to broadcast both episodes last night, or at least when I'm making this, last night, and so they did Episode 1 and 2 back-to-back, so it's more like a 2-hour premiere of True Detective Season 3, rather than just the hour-long episode. So, some people may think, that this was all just one premiere, but I'm categorizing it as at least Episode 1 and 2, and so that's what it is. So, Episode 2, I feel like, was a step down in terms of action and pacing, for sure. The pacing really slowed down with this one. And, which makes sense. I mean, the premiere was there, gave us a lot, built up a lot of things, but this one I felt like kind of took its time, did a lot of more character building in this episode, which was good. It's just a different kind of pace for this one. But again, I did really enjoy this episode as well. Like I said, my last one, True Detective is back, in my opinion, although I didn't hate Season 2 like a lot of people. Vince Vaughn, love him in Season 2, but this was really kind of getting back to what Season 1 did so well. So, anyways, let's get in then to the recap for this episode. Love to hear your thoughts, of course, of this episode and the series going forward. Maybe some of your theories, of course. It's all about true crime and kind of who done it, so I'd love to hear your guys' theories as well. And if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and consider subscribing to the channel. Would really appreciate it. Also, I'm going to be doing reviews weekly for these episodes as they come, so please stay tuned to the channel then if you're interested in those. Alright, so let's get into it. So we start off here with the deposition, right? So we're back to the 90s. So the time frames here are the 80s, 90s, and 2015, right? Those are the three that were established in Episode 1. And so now we're back in the 90s, taking place where this deposition is, right? And so then basically Hayes is telling telling the two guys that I didn't remember their names, if we even got them, if we got both of them. But he basically then tells them that somebody had snapped the boy's neck. Right, snapped the boy's neck and then put him into the cave. And this was, taken from the coroner's report. So that's how they found out about it. Of course, he found the dead body at the very end of last episode, and then he's telling them that they took it to the coroner's. So then, of course, he wants to know more details about this robbery involving Julie Purcell, who, of course, he never found in this case, and she was the second missing child in this whole case, right? And so he wants to know more details about her, and because he was just told, of course, in the last episode, that she was still alive, which obviously surprised him a lot, as we could see. And so anyways, then the one guy kind of offers to tell him more about it if they, if he keeps telling them more information about the case and giving his statement. And so they, kind of a give and take here. They're right. They're telling him, well, you tell us more about it and we might tell you more about Julie Purcell, right? Because he's not a part of the department anymore either, is that them sharing those details about the case would probably not be, would be prohibited, right? Would probably not be, allowed for them to share those details. So they're kind of giving them, a little bit of, an incentive right here to tell them more about the case. So then we get back to the 80s and the way he's now telling the story to the guys at the deposition, right? So then he goes on, says, we interviewed Woodard, or, what people refer to him as the trash man, right? The guy who was riding around the go-kart, collecting trash. And so we find out he's a fellow Vietnam vet, like Wayne Hayes. And I feel like this scene in particular did a really good job of kind of character building for Hayes, more than actually, Woodard's, part in this case. Overall, I think, he's not too suspicious, but I think they couldn't rule him out quite yet because of the fact that they, say that the Vietnam vets come back and they're greatly affected. Some of them that they know, or I guess Roland was saying this, that one guy he knows is in jail and that he's become, criminals, some of the vets who come back. And so they can't rule out Woodard for that fact. And then it also comes into play too, with maybe even teasing a little bit more for Hayes in the future, that he also was a Vietnam vet, and that maybe he has also been affected, maybe similarly to Woodard, with what happened, and now is that coming through in the case, and maybe that affected his judgment on the case as well, and also maybe affected his memory loss later in life, as we see in 2015 with the current times. So I do really like this scene, but I feel like it has a deeper meaning to it, right, not right now, but in the future. I think we're going to look back and say, okay, well, this actually gave us some pretty interesting stuff about Hayes in particular. So we get, we're back to older man Hayes, or the current times, 2015, and he goes down with his son there, who had a bigger role in this episode, but he goes down to visit the community center in the town. And so then when he sees that community center, it kind of brings back this moment, and so he remembers then the community meeting that they had, where they passed out some flyers about the missing children, of course, and I guess this is after he found the boy's body, right? The son's body. So anyway, so they pass out flyers for Julie's, picture and everything like that. Get people looking, and all that stuff. Then, just a general community meeting, getting together with the town. But he also then spends more time with his future wife, Amelia, and talks to her a little bit. And then also an important thing too is that he gives her that picture of the doll, which comes back and plays a big part in the rest of this episode for sure, right? And so anyways, just some, reminiscing kind of on that more time with his wife, talking with Amelia, and then also that community center moment that is also a part of, the crime, the case. And then we get the impression that moments like those kind of help him piece things together and remember stuff. As he says in the car, he doesn't remember much about his own daughter. And that, seeing those things, going to the community center, for example, helps him remember those, moments with his wife and what the case brought and all that stuff. So really interesting there, but also given away that he has probably serious memory problems, or not probably, he does, right? We start off the series, right, the season with him, telling himself on the tape that you have memory problem, right? And so I thought with this and going to the community center, I think we're going to see that more. And we do at the very end of the episode too, actually, where he's able to remember things. And of course, we see that memory kind of play out, which is new to us, right? Because we're still trying to uncover from all three different timelines. So was this memory then, attributed to his time in Vietnam, dementia, because of the case, the way that he was focused on it for so many years, and it took time out of his life and kind of, damaged him a little bit. So anyways, those are also questions to be answered. So then we see that Hayes and Roland there, and Roland West meet with two detectives. So the case has now become a little bit bigger. Now that they haven't found Julie and it's been a few days, now they're kind of bringing in some other guys into this. And so they meet with two detectives who become their partners essentially in the case. And the important part here is that these new partners will focus on finding the missing girl, Julie, while West and Hayes will focus on the death of the boy. So that is where now I think that they kind of, go to different paths. And now that's maybe why Hayes was so surprised that Julie was alive, because he didn't spend a lot of time after that looking for her, because he was focused on the case of the missing boy, who we found, dead last episode. And so that was an interesting thing. I thought that was important for this story going forward. So then we see Amelia, who is the English teacher, but, we know that's his future wife, and obviously they already are kind of connecting just at this time. So then we see that Amelia inquired her students about the angel dolls, right? Like I said, Wayne gave her that picture. And so luckily, really luckily, the one kid tells her that they were passed around at Halloween and that he thinks Julia got one. I think this is their friend, by the way, that was in last episode when the dad called to their house. I think this is the same guy, or the same boy. But anyways, the boy then tells her, or I guess tells Wayne, all the houses they went to. He kind of draws out a map, right? Marks all the houses that they were at and where this doll could have been. He doesn't know the exact house, right? But he kind of gives them a little bit of a blueprint here for where they could find it. And of course, this doll plays a huge part, right, in the case, because as he found the body, he found these two dolls that were placed there, and now they know that Julie had one, right? So that's a pretty big deal. Anyways, then we see that Hayes and West are kind of asking their bosses if they can go door to door, right? And just look kind of in the houses and see if someone has this doll, right? Go to these houses that the kid had mapped out and, just search them without a warrant, right? Just search the house and see if they have a Angel doll, and then hopefully they'll maybe connect things. But pretty quickly they're denied by their boss, right? Because first of all, they don't have the warrants. And they're kind of operating on a thing where, the community will just let us in. They'll let us search their house. But he says, that would be a privacy issue and that they probably would not be allowed to do so. And that's, understandable, right? And so anyways, they're denied there. But then, of course, the boss kind of double tracks them completely with this information. So then we see that Hayes meets with Amelia at a bar. Or I guess they were both in the bar at the same time. But anyways, I feel like this was the first real scene together with them two. And like I said at the very beginning, character building. I mean, this scene is great character building for the whole thing, and one of the best scenes so far that we've seen, right? So anyways, they're telling each other about their past, their schools that they went to, a little bit about their childhood, stuff like that. And then they talk about marriage. So she talks about marriage, and he tells her that he doesn't ever want to get married, and that people think he's crazy for that. Of course, we know he does get married and he has kids, but anyway, so at the point, though, he is kind of against marriage, so they talk about that a little bit. But then also, they begin to bond over their similarities, which I think is obviously a big part here in why they eventually got married, they have kids, is because they have a lot of similarities. And especially, I mean, back in episode 1, there was a little bit of race in there too, about how, Wayne and her are definitely in the minority here, in this Ozarks region, both black and pretty successful. I mean, in terms of that she's an English teacher for, it was a grade 8 to 12 or something at the local high school, and that he's a detective. And so, of course, that is a part of their bonding too. And that was kind of brought up in episode 1 too. But anyways, so then they're there at the bar, everything's good. But all of a sudden, then Wayne watches on the TV as his bosses totally cross them, right? And put out their single lead with this Halloween doll, and they put it out on the news. And that's exactly what Hayes didn't want, because now it kind of ruins everything. I mean, it ruins the whole aspect of them going door to door and the community being willing to do that. Now it just totally kind of destroys that whole mission that they were on, and the bosses totally crossed them. So it's not only that the boss denied their original plan, but then they also go full circle around and just completely screw them up, which again is an important thing, right? Was that done intentionally, or did they truly just think, yeah, it would have been a privacy issue, I think we should do it this way? So interesting to think there, right? Was it done purposely? We'll have to see. So then we see Hayes is very upset about it, as he should be, right? Ruins his lead. So anyways, he's very upset about it. Sparks one of the best scenes of the episode, in my opinion, between Roland West and him. I really like this episode. The writing for this episode, or this scene, sorry, was amazing too. He's talking about how those guys aren't his tribe, and that West should have taken care of it. It should have been his, responsibility. Of course, he's talking about race, but I also think he's kind of, just talking on a basis of that he's misunderstood, right? And that these bosses don't really care what he thinks, at all. And of course, that's attributed to the race factor, big time. But I think West is even maybe it's because of race solely, but he's also kind of more in with them, right? Per se. So I think that's what he's getting at there. He's saying that is your responsibility, Roland. You should have, help them not to do that. I don't think West was at all involved. He didn't tell them to do that, of course, or okay it even. But he's just trying to get to the point of, West, that was your responsibility. But of course, West not having it, right? He's like, do you even know where you are, or something like that. And then he mentions, I love this line. Wes mentions him making as much sense as his grandma's dementia. So just kind of a unique line there anyways. But it's also a little bit of foreshadowing, right? Because now we know that Wayne has memory problems in the current times, which is definitely interesting. So a little bit of a foreshadow there, but also just a kind of a throwaway line, but may actually mean something going forward. And then also, they're teasing at the fact then that Hayes is losing his memory, even in the 80s, right? So that, I think, was an important thing too out of that scene, that they're even teasing that Hayes may even be losing his memory already, not just in current times as we've already seen. So that's interesting too. I mean, we're kind of under the impression, well, he hasn't lost it yet, but has he? Or is that just a throwaway line, right? It definitely does have a lot of meanings, and either way, I really like the scene, for sure. So then we go back to current times, and he's back with the interview. So the interview people come back to the house the next day, I guess, and they're back with this interview. And Hayes tells the interviewer about how the town changed, like completely changed on them, right? Because of what the bosses did, put out this Halloween lead on the news, totally changed everything, right? Because of course all the town kind of turned on each other. They weren't sure who had these angel dolls, and this whole thing just kind of went out just crazy, right? And so they become kind of scared of each other. And of course this plan now to go around searching homes and getting people to help, that's not going to work, right? It's not going to work anymore, especially with this environment that they've created. And of course, that's exactly what they didn't want, and they could see that happening, but the bosses couldn't, and so they made the wrong move. So, of course, then that was kind of a key part in the case going forward in finding Julie, and also finding who killed the boy, and that the community was no longer on their side. So that was very tough, right? So then we see that Hayes and West, this actually had quite a bit of time in the episode, but it turned out not to be much of anything. But anyways, they track down this known child predator that Wes gets a tip on from some guy. It looked like a kind of a porn shop or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, so they get kind of a known child predator, and they think maybe he had something to do with it. So anyways, they take him out to a barn in the middle of nowhere in some field, and Wes kind of beats him. He beats him up, which obviously, I don't know that obviously that wouldn't have been proper protocol, but I don't know how much that would have been prohibited. Let's be honest. I mean, this guy was a real piece of shit. I mean, he just is. So he probably deserved the beating for sure. But I deserved a little bit more than that, to be honest. And he probably will get that, going to prison as they talk about. But anyways, so they kind of question him a little bit about where he was during Halloween, where he was during the night the children missed, or gone missing, and everything like that. But it turns out he doesn't have many answers, but he also wasn't involved. I mean, like, he's a piece of shit, right? He's going after kids. And then, of course, we later find out he's working at the daycare, which is just kind of gross and really kind of sad. So anyway, they strip him of his job there at the daycare, and kind of resolve he's probably not involved in this case, but at least we kind of got a piece of shit off the streets and found this guy. But anyways, yeah, again, a lot of time spent on that, but it didn't really turn into anything. So then we're back to the 90s, and the man from the deposition before tells Hayes that no investigation was put on the robbery case, or no investigator was put on the robbery case where Julie's fingerprints were found, right? And Hayes is still interested, though, in this, right? He's like, no investigator, not really a case launched on this one, but he's still interested in seeing how is Julie alive, right? There's a big question for him. And so then we see Hayes gets home to his wife and kids. It was nice to see that scene. And of course, that was a big parallel then to the next scene where his son has kids and a wife as well, both a boy and a girl, same type of situation. And so anyways, of course, he's still involved with the case and thinking about it. And then he also tells his wife, Amelia, that Julie is alive. And she was just, taken aback. She was really surprised by it too. And so obviously then I think that's setting up that in the 90s, he is definitely going to spend a lot of time going back to the case and trying to figure out where Julie is, maybe even track her down and find out what happened. Because, of course, she has probably all the answers of what happened. I mean, she was missing, they never found her, and now she's still alive 10 years later. So that's going to play a big part in there. Anyways, it was very interesting there. So then we're back to the 80s, and this is maybe the biggest detail of the case in the episode, is where Hayes and West go to the Purcell house and hear that they have received a note from the supposed kidnapper, right, and murderer, right? And so they arrive, they get to the house, they read the note, and says, I didn't get the exact wording, it went too quick, wow. Anyways, but Julia, it says, is in a safe place, and that they should let her go, something like that, something along those lines. And it's also made in scrapbook letters too, kind of taped onto this piece of paper. Of course, Mr. Purcell very worried. I mean, this is kind of an odd note. I mean, let her go. She's in a safe place or something like that. So kind of an odd situation there. Was she kidnapped by some guy, and he, did that, or is that even a note from her? Something going on. So, I mean, it could be anything, but that is probably the biggest clue we get this episode. And obviously Hayes doesn't know much about it either. So we end off the episode here with current times. Like I said, the parallel to the family, where it's Hayes now having dinner with his son's family, which, like I said, mirrors his family and his kids back in the 90s that we saw. And then, of course, in this scene, we see how bad his memory really is, in that he asks if he's able to see his daughter twice, like literally within minutes of each other. Totally forgets what he asked. And we see that the son has obviously been putting up with this a while, as he gets pretty tired of it pretty quick. And Hayes obviously doesn't understand, because he doesn't remember asking for the first time about it, right? And then the very end of the scene, or the end of the episode, sorry, is then he goes to the Purcell's house, and it's gone. Or something like that. I'm not sure if it's the Purcell's house, or maybe it's his house, him and Amelia's house. I'm not exactly sure. It's one of those houses, though. I think it's the Purcell house. And he goes there, and he's just on the street. I guess his son drove him there, or he drove himself. And he's just kind of walking there on the street, looking at the house, and it's gone. And he's terrified, because I don't think he remembers it ever being gone. Right? And so he's kind of terrified why this doesn't make sense, and his memory is definitely playing tricks on him. So that was the end of the episode. That's what I got from that scene, at least. Maybe it has some more meanings, but that's what I got. He went and saw that Purcell's house was gone, and his memory totally failing him. He freaked out. So that's my thought there. Anyways, just to wrap things up here, it truly is a multi-timeline story of a single case that changed this man's life throughout each time frame. So it's not just that they're using this, time to tell the story in different ways. Each time frame, the 80s, the 90s, 2015, each, time frame has been affected by this single case, this Purcell case. And obviously his memory now, a little bit shoddy, right? Not very good. And so now it's also affecting him that way too. So really great stuff here. A lot of mysteries surrounding each level of the case, right? First of all, the biggest question is who did it, right? We don't know an answer for that. And whether he got it right. That's kind of so the 80s, right, is who did it? Who did this case? Who was guilty? Whatever, right? And then 90s is, did he get it right? Did he get this case right? I mean, is the deposition where the guy's in there right? Did he get this one wrong? Did he get the wrong guy? And then back in 2015, we're kind of piecing this together and getting, where's Julia now? Right? Does he ever find her back in the 90s? Does he track her down? So a lot of big questions here, but those are kind of the three ones that I picked out that are still major questions going forward here into the next episodes. Alright, so in terms of a rating then for this episode, I gave last episode a 4.8 out of 5. I thought it was almost perfect except for the pacing, and that again played a big part in this episode. Not as much, to be fair, not as much, but it did play a big part. So I'll give this one out of 5 a 4.5 out of 5 for this episode. Just not as many clues and details as episode 1. I mean, like I said, really the only big clue in this episode was the letter at the very end. There really wasn't much about the case itself. Like I said at the very beginning, I felt like this episode had a lot of great character building that the first episode was missing. And so for that reason, talk about Amelia, about Hayes. We've had a lot of building about Roland West so far, about Stephen Dorff's character, but hopefully that'll be coming soon. In the teaser for the next couple episodes, it looks like he is going to be back in the 90s, and so hopefully we'll see him kind of play a big part in that. What else? Yeah, so great character building in this one. Definitely a lot less clues, and it really created even more questions. At the end of this episode, it's like, it creates a huge thing with his memory. That was a big focus too, and how that affected his work on the case, and obviously his current life now. So yeah, really great episode. I just think it was a step down from last episode, just in terms of the actual crime, the actual story not much happened in this episode. So I do also, Scoot McNairy, I think is his name. He's playing Mr. Purcell. Amazing job in this episode. I didn't mention him last episode, but he's doing an amazing job, giving a great performance in this one for sure. Anyways, my main focus for this episode, though, my favorite character is going to be Amelia, played by Carmen Ejogo. I think she's doing a good job. Some of the scenes felt a little bit flat, but again, that has to do with the timelines, and also, we don't know a lot about her quite yet. I mean, we got a little bit of past, right, at that scene at the bar. We learned a little bit more about her, but we don't know kind of her characteristics yet, and kind of where she went, how she wrote this book, right? You know, how much involved is she in this case with Wayne? So a lot of things to kind of still learn, and so that's why I felt a couple of the scenes didn't quite, you know, meet the mark, but I think she's doing an amazing job. Carmen Ejogo, she was in Fantastic Beasts, a few other things just recently, and another show she was in recently. But yeah, really great to see her in this, and I think she's doing a great job. You know, as is the rest of the cast too. I mean, you know, really great stuff. Stephen Dorff, Scoot McNairy, Mahershala Ali, of course, right? Just a force of a performance so far. But anyways, yeah, I mean, really great stuff from Carmen Ejogo, and it could be interesting too how Amelia plays into this, because we know she wrote the book, we know she has a significant role in this case in Wayne's life. And so we'll have to see how she kind of plays into things. But anyways, guys, that'll just about do it for my review then of True Detective Season 3, Episode 2. Please come back next week for Season 3, Episode 3 review. I'll be back, of course, doing the same thing, recapping and talking about the episode. So, again, love to hear your thoughts on this episode and your theories going forward. At this point, I still think the cousin is involved. That's my prediction right now going forward, is that the cousin is involved. But you know, definitely some other, you know, situations here, and you know, probabilities, you know, chances of some other people being involved, especially the bosses. Some sketchy stuff going on in this episode, so we'll have to see if they are kind of in on it or something like that. But we'll see going forward how this series goes, and of course how it plays out. But anyways, guys, again, thanks so much for watching this one. Thanks so much for support on the channel recently. Really do appreciate it. And yeah, that'll just about do it. So then we'll see you guys next week for True Detective Season 3, Episode 3.